This meeting is being recorded. We will publish the recording later for you if you want to share it with your colleagues, or if you're watching this online on YouTube, then don't hesitate to write in comments. We do follow them, and of course subscribe to the channel. We will talk about retail, and we'll talk about why a lot of e-learning companies do not realize some specifics about the business of retail, about this whole industry, which is different from others. And to be fair, we'll be sharing from our own experience. You know, this knowledge, we did not read this in a book, but it's a compilation of our own 15-year history at Intea. And so that's very original content. And we'll share a few cases, and we'll share a few tips, ideas, or a strategy might be a little bit of a bold name for how you can improve your learning uptake, learning engagement, and generally be more successful in your learning and development strategies if you work in a retail business. And I think we need to define retail for this. We were just talking, and we started like really widening the idea, but essentially retail is big box retail, you know, the supermarket chains and stores like that. We're also talking about retail in the sense of like store chains, franchise networks, and so on. But also if you work for a bank, for example, you do have this retail component, which will come very useful. I mean, where this content will be very useful for you in that sense as well. And even if you work for a government organization, there is a lot of frontline part of your processes that might benefit from what we will discuss today. So just one last thing before we actually dive into the content. For those who have just joined, my name is Sergey, this is Ravis. We are partners at Intea Learning, which is a company based in Latvia that works with large organizations, helping them to overcome challenges related to their learning and development, especially in the online form. From advisory and systems implementation to content creation and user support. We do it all. We work with a number of companies throughout Europe and sometimes beyond Europe as well. I think our coolest projects were in Africa at one point.
Yeah, I mean, it's been Africa, I think it was Texas at some point, and Australia.
Right, so if you're interested in any of that, do get in touch. But right now, let's talk about retail. I looked up a few figures to give everyone an idea of how much of a staple retail is to at least European economy. Well, you can see that's more than 11% of GDP. It employs 30 million people, and 30 million is, I think, about 15% of workforce in the country. It has 5.5 million companies. Do you want to guess how many of those companies are small and medium enterprises?
5.4 million.
Yes. In the report by EU Commission, it said 99%, so about right. Yes.
But still.
Still, yes. And a lot of those small companies are actually franchising large brands, so if you are working for one of those franchise networks, stay tuned. Right. And despite the fact that it's so ubiquitous in our lives, it's so embedded into our economy, the e-learning companies, mostly from what we talk to our peers, from what we know over those 15 years, they are very much focused on things like finance, on things like regulations, compliance, these things which are, as we said, a little bit abstract.
And many times when you talk about e-learning with a broader audience, the instant reaction is, sorry, our employees, they don't have, you know, their work, kind of their work is not computerized. Yeah, they don't have their personal computer, so e-learning is not for us. I mean, our people are kind of wandering around the store or a warehouse. So kind of when you talk to retail, very often you get this pushback. back, and it's not
typical,
something that works for us.
But from e-learning company side, it's kind of similar when you say that. Well, if we're so used to people spending the whole day at the computer and then coming back and having all the gadgets at home, we'll get to that in a sec. It's so easy to actually reach them, and they're so used to reading through documents and so on. Like their whole office workers are so much easier to work with. So that's, I think, a big part of where this misunderstanding comes from. But let's dissect what specific. Well, if not mistakes, then hiccups we've had over the years, and what we heard from our customers, what they told us with regards to their experiences with working with other e-learning companies. So here's 5 reasons why retail is different from other industries, and that you have to be aware when you either start on your e-learning journey or you're onboarding a new e-learning vendor and so on. So, well, first of all, like we've said, a lot of retail is blue-collar workforce, and I think blue-collar is not exactly the correct term. We're probably not talking about manufacturing and so on, but also like there are security guards, there are warehouse workers, there are forklift drivers, there are those people whose job is in no way connected to sitting in front of a personal computer at their desk. And reaching them and training them might be an issue, and not just a technical issue. It's that they do not have the habit of sitting down and reading through material, going through the typical kind of scholar approach where you read through something, you analyze, you solve tasks, you go through quizzes. Even test taking might be an issue for them. So that's number one. And I think one of the surprising lessons for us was that I think when we started working with one of the largest retail chains, I think we kind of underestimated their technical prowess.
Yeah, and they hear it in underestimated, not overestimated, because that was, I mean, the people in the headquarters were very skeptical, if not pessimistic about the ability of these people in the stores to learn digitally, uptake the information, and have a pleasant experience in it.
But the truth of the matter is, if you communicate with anyone, even with people with like poor language skills and no higher education, like sometimes not even like school education, they're pretty much fine working with their phones, figuring out games, figuring out how to watch a movie, and not even on a Netflix, but on a much more complex site that lets you pirate stuff or something like that. They're fine. Like when they're motivated, when they need it, and when the interfaces are built for them. So if you keep that in mind, you'll be fine regardless of that fact. The other part where retail is very much different from, let's say, a bank or let's say a medical company, is that retail is very much decentralized. It has a lot of, not even branches, but like really remote locations, like stores which are removed from the headquarters, not just geographically, but also organizationally, and also culturally. In a bank, if you want to communicate to people in a different way outside of online channels, for example, you can go to coffee machines and like put up posters in there, and as a learning and development manager, all you need to do is essentially just ride the elevator 25 floors up and down and do that, because everyone is in a single building, and in this case, everyone is somewhere in a different country, in a much smaller city or town. They might not be even owned by your company, right, or managed. We've worked with franchise networks, and that was a challenge because there is no leverage, right? You cannot fire someone who is not employed by you. You need to train employees of someone else who is your partner or client, essentially, a franchisee. and you don't even know the names of those people who work for those people sometimes. So that's a challenge. Like, they are so remote and there are so many of them everywhere that a lot of communication channels that we typically use just break down and don't exist at all. So that's one part of that. The other part of that is that, well, who's the king in there, right?
Yeah, who's
it's a little bit like
taking the shots?
What was the name? The Three Billboards on the Road, the Three Billboards movie. Remember a few years ago? Yeah. So it's an American drama about a sheriff who essentially is the king of the small town and does whatever the sheriff pleases, and everyone is at the sheriff's mercy, and you can't do anything about that. And people were like, "This is America. Like, we have rights, we have laws. There's constitution. There are amendments and so on," but you are so far from everything that whoever is in charge in that particular location is in charge of your life almost. I think someone is trying to help us. 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. Thank you, David. Right, great movie, highly recommended. So in that sense, when we work with retail, the king is the store manager, right? And that means that if you want to be successful, you need to get to them first, right? You need to onboard them, motivate them, sell the whole e-learning idea to them before anything happens with the employees. Because if you send computers to them to take the training, those computers will be lost somewhere in the warehouse and never distributed to them. If you want them to take at least 1 hour of learning per week, then you will quickly find out that that hour is not paid for by the store manager, and they push their people to actually do the actual work, not this silly online stuff that the headquarters sent. Or it can be just in the culture, in the store managers just thinking that anything that the headquarters sends is just a nuisance.
And then the worst scenario is when you are trying to certify your people. Then what we've seen is those cheating events when the store manager will say, "Okay, Sergey, those guys there want you to pass that test. Here are the answer. Just fill that in and go work." Finally,
or here's your buddy who will go through the test.
Or
with
it becomes
you.
a group exercise.
But we've heard about a different case. So the headquarters wanted to test the aptitude of store managers on things like on things like digital skills, on things like basic management skills, like a little bit of psychometry in there, just to get a picture of who those store managers are, because again, they are remote. They you don't meet them every day or ever, but they are important. So they wanted to test them. So what a lot of store managers did, they said, "I don't have time for that, and frankly, I don't want to risk that." So they took their best employee or employees and made them pass those tests. Right? Because in many cases, like the senior employee in a store will know more about the business and more about systems and more about processes.
Or you take a bright student who's working there only while he's studying, but he's clearly overqualified in the long run to be, warehouse worker, and he knows all the management theories and can deal with that.
So lack of infrastructure is another problem. So in a typical office environment, we sit in front of computers all day. So if I want to push some online learning onto you, it's very easy. I just send you a link, you open it in a browser, and you go through that. We've had issues starting from, for example, lack of headsets. Like we had we worked with an insurance company, but they had a very wide retail network of people in those 1 or 2 people little outlets across the country, where you would go into, let's say, a supermarket, and then if you needed to buy car insurance, you could go over to this desk essentially and talk to the employees there and buy your insurance. And when those employees needed to be trained, there were a couple of issues. Well, first of all, they had computers, but those computers didn't have any headsets or any like sound equipment. So to take anything that was audio based, they couldn't do that. So the company had to buy thousands of those headsets and then distribute those. But then they found out that they cannot do that during the day because it looks weird and unfriendly to people who you want to kind of sell stuff to when you are watching something intently in headset during your
clients stop approaching you. They think you will not serve them.
Exactly. So that was a fail, and given all that, I think in many cases those headsets weren't even distributed; they were just sitting in like regional warehouse. So that was a bit of a fail when the headquarter requested us to build like an e-learning the way we typically do that, with a little bit of narration and a little bit of video, and that didn't work. So. You have to keep in mind that that can fail even if you have computers, but in typical retail you don't have computers, right? So you go to a typical supermarket chain and like the only computer they have is actually at the cash register, and we've seen cases where those computers were repurposed for learning. We had the kiosk chain as a client who delivered training on the same system that their cash register was running on, so the training could only be launched when the cash register was off.
It goes beyond physical infrastructure. Remember, we launched this big network, kind of they installed those kiosks, separate computers, and when people started to take trainings that need a lot of broadband, the cash register stopped working.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so basically a lot of things. So it can be many things.
Someone goes online, starts watching a training video, and your card transactions just stop.
Because nobody thought about it when they were putting it all together.
Another issue in terms of infrastructure, for example, how many of those warehouse workers have corporate emails, for example, or have emails at all, or have emails that you are aware of and you know that those emails are secure, for example, and so on. There's a ton of things. Like in one case, we had to build a system where workers were authorized by short messages. So they get SMS, they get a text code. And use it to like as a one-time password to log in every time. Because it didn't have email at all. So you have to be aware of that, and like a typical or a youngish e-learning company years ago could be taken aback by an avalanche of these things if you're used to working with banks and healthcare and whatnot. Another part of retail kind of mindset, I would say, is a constant push for cost efficiency, right? The success of retail is in keeping the costs down, in pushing vendors to provide as low of like a purchasing cost as possible, and the adoption of some more fancy or expensive things might be, well, first of all, kind of challenging, and secondly, will be a little bit out of line to what they're used to. So what I'm trying to say, if an e-learning company does not know how to do stuff in simple ways, like without bells and whistles, if their business model is based on delivering like highly complex, media-rich, expensive projects, they will not be able to work with retail with that mindset and with that absolute need for cost efficiency. And finally, in retail, a lot of knowledge that the learners need to know lies not with the company, but with the vendors. For example, if you are an electronics shop and you're selling vacuums, then you will have vacuum cleaners from 4 different brands. And it would be madness if you needed to build product learning on 4 different brands of vacuum cleaners and so on. Think about phones, right? Yeah. It's probably like 15 different makers.
And I have a very good example here. One of our customers in the Nordics, exactly in the electronics business, how they turned it all around. They understood that their LMS is essentially a marketplace or a marketing platform, and they went out to their vendors and said, guys, if you want our guys to sell your products well, provide us with good content. And they were like, okay, what does that mean? So a guideline was created for all vendors that this is the format we wanted. 10 minutes, intro video, quiz in the end, whatever you think fit. And suddenly, free of charge. You get a lot of quality content produced maybe by you, your vendors, doesn't really matter. But the ones who are paying for that content are the vendors.
Yeah.
So
they are absolutely motivated to provide good content, because if your learners know more about a certain product or a brand, if they are motivated, if they are indoctrinated in a way by that brand through learning, then but chances are the sales will shift in that direction.
Yeah, the same goes also for, I would say, an integrated company like a bank. If somebody in the headquarters, a product manager, wants people in the retail network to sell something, they have to be the sponsors, not only in terms of knowledge, but very often maybe in terms of budget. Guys, you want to push this product, you're pushing it on TV, let's say credit cards, let's push it on our LMS as well, and the cost will be, it will be negligible cost, right, as compared to
and we can also be talking about other vendors, like software vendors. If you have like a cash register or warehouse system and so on that your employees need to use, or equipment that they use, you can talk with the vendor to have them co-create or co-sponsor the creation of this content, because it's in their best interest that you use this equipment more efficiently.
You don't overload the support.
You get all the benefit from this and so on. They might not necessarily be already doing that, but you might be just the spark that instigates that. So it's worth a try at least, right, to have that conversation. Right, so now that we've established that retail is different, let me outline something that I call the retail paradox, which is the fact that on one hand we talk about like blue collar workers, like people with simpler educational habits. We talk about lack of equipment for learning, like again, everything is like a little bit more seems to be a little bit more primitive or basic or simpler and so on. Like it seems so, but in fact, retail requires way more complex instructional approaches and technological approaches when it comes to learning than let's say a typical bank. In a bank, it's like everything is easy. Like whatever you create, it'll go, right? It'll be used. People will find a way around. In retail, if it doesn't work perfectly and immediately and with very specific audience, it just fails immediately. So the solutions we'll outline, if you know, need to be rather complex because of the basicness of some other things. You have to compensate for that, and we call this the retail paradox. But when we say complex, it does not mean that we're talking about VR simulators like forklifts in virtual space or process simulation software and stuff like that. Not at all. What we're talking about is things like gamified conversation simulators, right? So let's say you have a mobile game where you need to chat to a customer who is maybe dissatisfied with their experience, and you need to find out what's happening. Use some techniques to calm them down, and solve everything in line with the company policies. Maybe that's a simple software simulation, or I'll show you something cool in a sec. It's a simulator that we've built for a press kiosk or chain of press kiosks, where the employees or the future employees, it was the basic onboarding for new employees, needed to learn how to put different newspapers and magazines onto shelves. Because there is, I think they called it a planogram.
Yeah, it's called a planogram.
If you're from retail, let us know.
Yeah.
There's a certain schematic or certain system to how the magazines are positioned on the shelves. Some of it is required by law, some of this is required by marketing, and it's paramount that it's the same in every store, so you cannot just randomly put them onto the shelves.
The same every morning.
And the same every morning and so on.
'cause
Like it's a repeating
ongoing
process that you have to do. It's crucial, it's an important process. So we need to train people. So instead of telling them a million times or showing them a million times, we gave them a simulator where they can just, it's like a computer game where you drag those magazines onto the shelf. It scores you, tells you how right you were and how wrong you were. The wrongly placed magazines just fall off and you need to do that again. There are a number of attempts and so on. It's a little game. It's not much different from other games that you play on your phone, except that it's useful for your job. That is what we mean by saying that you need simulations, right? You don't need VR, but you need to look at the specific processes or the jobs that people do and train them to do those jobs in a safe, simulated environment, for example, and then provide them with knowledge required to do those things, not just dump a lot of theory on them or show them something a million times. That showing does not work, or works maybe 10% of the time. Right. Since we're already into strategies for success, let's highlight a few. Well, first of all, as we've already told you, do engage store managers if you want to be successful. Make sure that they are trained, that they like the training. We've had this training with a franchise network of standards. We'll get to the case in a sec, where the only person that was known to the HQ was the store manager or the franchise owner. They had multiple stores. They only had their emails. They only were communicating with them. They barely knew how many people work in the store. So to push a project which was concentrated around increasing the average sale, in dealing with objections, and
wrapping of products.
This like presentation standards and wrapping standards in this company which essentially sells soap and cosmetics. So it's all about not the soap, but about how nicely it's wrapped. If you've seen Love Actually, you know what we're talking about. There's scene with Mr. Bean in it. With the Rowan Atkinson. So what we did, we actually created the game and we invited the store managers to play that exclusively, and they played it and they had so much fun and they gave a lot of feedback. So we changed it, and only then we rolled out to employees. But the way we rolled out, we just said the store managers, well, that is available for your employees, please do distribute. And what they did, they went to their employees and they said, you need to play this. I played this, it's nice, it's useful, you have to do that, because I will earn more as a franchisee if you go through that experience. So they pushed them into the game, because otherwise, if we would send that somehow directly to the learners, then the managers could become the hurdle. The obstacle to that. They would say, what are you doing? Are you playing on your phone? What are you playing? Something from HQ, like forget about it. Like go and swipe the floor maybe, or something like that. So that's one. Two, mobile learning. It's a solution to infrastructure. Everyone has a mobile phone. Again, there's like an asterisk to that. You need to make sure that the phones that they have actually support the stuff that you're trying to push. Do not test on your own phone. Your own phone is likely way better than their own phone. I don't have like very up-to-date statistics, but a few years ago, the average cost of a phone that an average American had was about $150.
Where is iPhone in that figure?
Yes. So not iPhones, not even like mid-range phones. So make sure that the phones that they have actually work with what you're trying to do, but they do have phones. And we've done training over text messages, right? You can actually text people the tip of the day, you can ask them questions and they can reply with quizzes, they can engage in chat rooms with bots and whatnot, something that does not require a lot of bandwidth or a lot of processing power or good screens or anything like that. Because again, a lot of people will have those huge fonts and they do not see very well if they're like I am, my age or more. And you have to be aware of that, but mobile learning is the key in retail, we think. Again, gamification and sims, we've shown you a few examples of simulations and how you can gamify the process. That's super important. for people who are not in the habit of just reading through a lot of material, analyzing this, working through exercises and so on. Vendor content, we talked about vendor content, and less is more. I think that's a golden rule for making things simple where they can't be simple, and concentrating your effort in crucial parts rather than going for bells and whistles.
And also in a sense that also banks, as we said, it's not a typical retail.
I think we're bashing banks a lot.
No, I'm not bashing it, but just saying that what we received kind of there with the feedback was it's all good and nice, and managers understand, not the store, but branch managers understand the value, but the push was always for the length, because the key cost there is time. So when we say less is more, kind of frame yourself into, I have 20 minutes to deliver this message, so what do I do? Or I have 10 minutes, so because for them the cost is not in the simplicity or complexity, but really in how much time you steal from.
I think it's actually a very good segue into our breakfast from about a year ago.
About the pricing of
the four P's of marketing, and in general we had a series on what you can kind of steal out of a marketer's playbook to make your learning better, and I think in this case it will be like double the value. You have to think like a marketer in many sense, to grab people's attention, to get the message across in very simple and straightforward terms, and instill the behavior change that you're looking for. All right, so a quick rundown of 3 cases. I don't want to go in like we can talk for a whole breakfast about each of them, but I wanted you to just outline a few examples of how those things that we talked about previously in the last half hour kind of happened with actual clients. And if you want to know more, do feel free to contact us. We'll be happy to do a deep dive one-on-one with you into any of those cases or others.
Yeah, so LMT, that's my case, and basically, very shortly, LMT, a mobile operator with a retail network where we had to work with different audiences, but let's take retail. What happened is they came to us and said, okay, we have this customer service standard, which is a formal document, and quite a big one, because it has to describe every aspect of our customer service. And it's also kind of a bit of a legal document, so it's not very nice for retail people who want practical tips and stuff. At the same time, we don't want to overinvest, overuse their time. We want this to be really effective. So the simplicity of the solution was that we said, okay, it has to be 80% practice, 20% theory. For the practice, we exactly use the scenario approach. We just said, okay, what are the typical scenarios in customer service that we have to play through, have to train, like a simulator, or like what they call it, like a simulator. We call it simulator actually. The idea was, so what do we do with theory? And we came to a very simple solution that every simulation was preceded just by one A4 format PDF, just outlining the key things. It's like
kind of crazy.
Infographic. It's the bare minimum, right? You've seen those,
Yes, it's kind of crazy when someone asks you like, what format for your e-learning did you choose, and you say, well, it was a PDF.
It was a PDF.
It seems simplistic, but yes, there was a very good and thought through copy.
What you concentrate not on interactivity.
It was nicely designed, not in terms of just looking nice, but being very much understandable and laid out very clearly. And then yes, it was accompanied by
scenarios. And what
practical
happened?
Scenarios, yes.
Yeah, and what happened? It was launched on an LMS, which was already kind of, we say it's sales driven or marketing driven, because they consider their LMS as an essential part of how they push their products. So it's already tailored for that, with badges, gamification, scores, leaderboard. So it has all that same competitive flair to it, right?
And in this case, the retail employees are essentially just the sales people, right? They are the ones who need to make sure that you
Buy.
pop in to renew your contract, and you walk out with 2 iPads and the cover for your phone and an insurance on all your
all of
devices.
that. Yeah, exactly. Also, one of the aspects of the success was that when the management board of the company, not the store managers, those were already on board, but the management board played those simulations, they were amazed, they were happy. That was definitely project of the year in terms of training. And of course, then it goes down then to every store employee that, our board says that they like it, so yeah, we have to adapt it. Adopt it, sorry. And as I said, gamified. So you see all those principles we talked about.
Another one, I can actually take this one because I've talked about this a little bit already, right? So this is the cosmetics/soap company, which had this very loose franchising network, and we had to employ a few tricks, as I explained, to get to the actual learners. In fact, we ended up being the only IT system in the company at one point that
can reach people.
That had all the emails, so it transformed into like the information system later, just like disseminating news. We taught them about presentation standards, like how you wrap stuff, because it's something that's very hard to control. If when one store is in China, another store is in Dubai, another store is here in Latvia, and there are, I think, over 200 such stores run by very different people who are interested in minimizing their own costs just as much as in selling. So they ended up like wrapping stuff into like simple wrapping paper and just giving it out and so on, ruining that. And if you try to just push this onto them, you would have failed, right? You had to really engage people and sell them the idea of why this is happening, why this is value. And you had to sell this to store managers, because as an employee, you can say, hey, this needs to be wrapped like this and that according to the corporate standard. And the employer will just hand you a bunch of like really basic wrapping paper and say like, use this and shut up. So yes, there was another training on upselling and average check, for which we built like a simulation where people walk into the store, they ask you about products, and you have to be very clever about what and how you offer them to maximize their purchase. And you can actually physically, in this screenshot, you can actually see their basket, which you need to make sure that it's full of everything that they can potentially buy in your store through that conversation. If you don't achieve that, you need to restart, and you get points for that. And there is a worldwide competition running with a leaderboard. Yes, it was more focused on engagement to really lure people in who might not even be aware that the headquarters exists in a country thousands of kilometers away. So that was a challenge. And then one of our favorite customers, a huge retail chain. It's part of the Eco Group from Sweden, Rimi Baltic, with about 15,000 employees.
I think it's 15, maybe more now, because
through
again
3 states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia.
Yeah. So of course, one of the things that happened here, we wanted to get closer to the learners, and we wanted to create this direct link, a little bit like bypassing the store managers, but you cannot do that, right? They have to sponsor it. So the idea was, so how do we engage? First of all, how do we engage learners? Then how do we make sure that they adopt this new way of training, which is new to them? They used to have those classroom or seminar kind of stuff. And then the line managers, the shop managers who are not very happy kind of spending time on training, not being at the cash register. So the solution was the Institute of Ambassadors. Basically, they selected one person or a couple of people per store, said, you will have to facilitate the training, which was at first a bit they were resentful to the idea, but then what they did then with the ambassadors said, okay, but by being ambassador, we'll give you access to more training and development possibilities than everyone else in the store, kind of creating this privileged class, right? But that if the first year was kind of a bit patchy, the next year people were already competing for that position. So this is when we knew that the e-learning has taken off. And the infrastructure. That was a
So
nice.
instead of
that
relying,
was an endeavor.
yes, instead of relying on mobile phones of employees, and of course they didn't have computers, the company installed a special learning computer or kiosk in every store. Which was reserved only for learning. It was also not connected and still is not connected to the internet. It actually works inside its own private network that can only be accessed from the HQ, from this office where we are right now, and from the stores for security reasons. It runs specific hardware, which again makes things very easy. We know exactly the hardware that is being run on. And we've built the first system for hosting this, right? Not just the courses, but also the whole platform with those custom authentication methods through text
codes,
messages and pin codes.
Yeah.
Pin codes, yes.
Pin codes, yeah.
At the beginning, instead of passwords, because again, we found out that people are not very good with passwords. They're not just used to.
And they don't have their personalized corporate emails.
So that they can kind of reset those passwords if they forget them and so on. So it doesn't work that smoothly. So we had to work around all of that. By now they have moved on to a way bigger and more important system which runs differently, but they still do have that infrastructure in every store. And yes, there was this hiccup, as Raivis mentioned, when at first when they would launch a video, like the whole...
It was not even a video. We didn't use videos for that purpose, but it was enough to launch a couple of big pictures to stop the mobile internet somewhere in a remote location.
Yes,
yeah.
So we had to take care of that as well. So yes, purpose infrastructure is often a solution in the retail situation. Like I said, they've moved on to a different platform, and that was our intent from the very beginning. When we designed the very first platform, we said, okay, this is like your training wheels.
This is your MVP.
This is your minimum viable product that you will use to launch maybe one, maybe two, maybe three courses at most. But then when they started asking for more and more and more features, we said, no, we will not be building those features. You need to grow up, essentially, and buy like a grown man's platform. So they did. That's pretty much it for today. That was a bit longer than usual. Do join us next Friday for a conversation about IT security and security as such. We'll talk about why everyone hates security training and dismisses it, why it doesn't really work and doesn't achieve the actual result, the increased security and safety that you want to, and what you can do to actually change that, right, and be successful. If you're watching this on YouTube, do subscribe, like, and comment. And if you're watching this live right now, there's a whole channel of useful content out there. Do check this out. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to talk, reach out to Intea, and see you next Friday.
Next Friday, yeah. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.